Air guitar, no, we get it.
Welcome to the Guitar Shop Podcast. Officially Season 3, Episode 1. I am Wade Stark, owner of Wade's Guitar Shop.
And I'm Alex, manager of Wade's Guitar Shop. I'm Lothar of the Hill People.
It's been a while, but we're glad to be back. Check us out on our website, wadesguitarshop.com. Click on the podcast link. Download us on all the podcast aggregators, iTunes, Miro, the Zune Marketplace. Comments, questions, any suggestions for the show, including previous episodes. I think a lot of people kind of think they only need to comment on the most recent episode. Dream big. Anything you saw in episode 1 through where we are now. Wade's Guitar Shop at sbcglobal.net. Thank you. We are also on Facebook. You can like us from Wade's Guitar Shop site, or just go over to Facebook. It's the Guitar Shop Podcast on Facebook. Alex, welcome back. It has been a while.
Yes.
Sirloin. We have a few things to talk about tonight. Hopefully we will have enough time to chat all of them up, including you shot the idea to me the other day of talking about fret dressing. And I thought this was a really great topic because it is one of the most common questions, concerns that we get in the shop. Being a repair shop too, I mean, we've constantly got repairs going on in the shop. And fret wear is super, super common, from the very, very light, almost undetectable fret wear to there are people playing guitars that have giant, deep, sweeping pits in their frets that are making their guitar buzz and throw off the intonation and whatnot. So why don't you jump in and sort of tell me, where you wanted to go with this?
Well, just that, like you were saying, it is a common thing. When you buy a new guitar or a used guitar, I guess that would be another good point, is that would be one of the many things that you want to look at, is the condition of the frets. But with a brand new guitar, if you play it aggressively for a year or two, you're going to start to notice, maybe even less time than that, depending on how aggressively you play. I guess that's a good point too. The frets can wear to really wild degrees. Sometimes you'll see a guitar that's 30 or even 50 years old, minimal fret wear.
Yeah.
Sometimes you'll see a guitar that's 3 weeks old with shocking fret wear.
Yeah, I mean, that's just it. This is totally a topic that could take up the entire show, no problem, because it really does. I mean, we've had customers buy brand new guitars, and believe me, there's no crazy fret technology that any one company has over another company.
True.
I mean, granted, there are companies now producing stainless steel frets, which I'm not a huge fan of. I don't like them tonally, but traditionally the 18% nickel silver fret is the fret that has been used for over 100 years. And we have had customers, whether it's from us or another store, buy new guitars, Fender, Gibson, Gretsch, Guild, Martin, and 3 months into playing heavily on their guitar with maybe sometimes pretty heavy strings or pretty aggressive playing style, fret wear. Yep. And they freak out. They think their guitar is defective.
Right. Well, yeah, like you were saying, you can make the frets out of harder material, but you need to also be able to work with it. It also needs to sound good.
Mm-hmm.
I think people don't think about that aspect, the sound aspect. I guess just defining what a fret dress is one of the things I wanted to mention, because we seem to always have to kind of explain that, but. As you visual aid, as you have a fret here, and the strings start to wear, and you get big divots in it. And so what a fret dress is you basically, there's two reasons, well, there's a number of reasons why you'd want to do a fret dress, but one would be giant divots in your fret, or even small divots in your frets. The other would be if your frets aren't perfectly lined up or even. And many, many times, even with brand new guitars, when you adjust the neck properly, it will bring out any sort of defects in the frets, and if they're misaligned in any way, you could level them to make sure that they're closer to proper alignment. And basically what you do is you file all the frets down so that they're even, and then you put the crown back in the fret. There's a nice round oval. If you look at your fret on the guitar you have, you'll see that it's not flat. It's really actually, or it should be, kind of an oval on the surface of it. So you take a crowning file and you put that oval back in each fret, and then you do multiple stages of sanding and multiple stages of buffing, and then bada bing, you got a guitar that plays like a dream. The other question that I get beyond just what is a fret level is, who's a candidate for a fret level? Should I just, there's divots in my frets, I guess I need a refret, which defining a refret is pulling the frets out, putting new frets in, and then doing a fret level.
Right.
In many cases you can get, I don't know, it depends on your the way you play and what type of instrument it is, but with acoustic guitars it seems like you can get quite a few fret levels out of them if you're not looking for a real high profile fret.
Right. Well, I mean, so first of all, with traditional fret material, so we're talking 18% nickel silver, companies like Dunlop, who produce a wide variety of frets, make everything from vintage, pretty narrow and not very tall fret wire.
Right.
And it's kind of measured, in three things. The width of the fret, the height of the fret, and the thickness of the tang. And the tang is the part that actually goes down into the slot in the neck, and that's just really crucial, that because if you are refretting a guitar that has very worn slots in your guitar, you may want to widen that tang so it gets a really good bite when you hammer those frets in. But at the end of the day, if we're talking about the height and the width of the fret, the taller and wider that fret is, the more times you can level it before you have to think about refretting it.
Right, and probably, the more critical it is to have them line up, because you're with a higher profile fret, you've got more opportunity for inaccuracy.
Right.
Ultimately.
Well, which brings up too. I mean, you brought up to me the other day, and which we see this all the time. With the high prevalence of, literally hundreds and hundreds of different models, different brands of guitars made, mostly these days in China. So most of the stuff under like $400 is made in China. And some of it's pretty good, but what you don't often see is good fretwork.
Yep.
The frets are sort of seated, they're not leveled. And unfortunately then what we are seeing, with a lot of people who are disappointed at how their new $300-400, sometimes Squires, Epiphones, Ibanez's are playing, is, fret buzz, notes choking out, and at the end of the day what it is the frets are not level.
Lined up.
You put a little fret rocker tool on them and you can see that you have low frets, high frets.
Right, one high fret spoils the whole party.
Yeah.
So you might, oftentimes here, not to brag, but sometimes we'll have people bring in guitars that they've had worked on numerous times and they're still getting an anomalous buzz somewhere in the neck. And at that point, that we're going to look at it, the neck looks good and this looks good and everything looks good. And we use what you just mentioned, a little very perfectly machined piece of metal that we can put on the fret rocker to see if they line up, and we'll go up and down the neck, and usually that's definitely one of the things that can cause it, is just one rogue fret, one fret that's sitting a little higher than others. Everything above it's gonna rattle and buzz and so on.
And definitely over time you're gonna see this on some higher quality guitars that are a little older, because drastic temperature and humidity changes are going to sometimes cause frets to unseat. Wood swells and then maybe shrinks. The metal of the fret does not ever shrink or expand, so it's always the wood of your fingerboard that is changing, and eventually your frets are going to pop out. Another thing that we see, which will very often lead to a fret leveling but also cause crazy problems too, is when the end of a fret comes loose and you get this bouncy edge of a fret that's just sort of bouncing off the end of the fingerboard. And sometimes it's caused by the guitar aging, other times it's caused by maybe you actually bumped the edge of the guitar and it caught that fret and just kind of pushed it up a little bit.
Or it was never seated properly in the first place and it just creeps out. And it won't sound right. It'll sound strange. Yeah. Even if you hear the note, it'll sound kind of like a ghostly note or something. Yeah.
Well, and unfortunately, if you try to do a fret dressing, then when you've got bouncing frets, you're gonna file, the file will pass over the fret. And then as the file gets past it, the fret jumps back up.
Right back
you
where
file,
it was,
pushes it down, and it jumps back up, and you're never going to get level frets too. So those frets need to be reseated. Sometimes they need to be epoxied, or slots need to be filled and recut, and that fret put back in properly before you can do a fret dressing. So when we do fret dressings on guitars that have heavy fret wear, at what point do you recommend somebody saying, you've gone far enough, you should really look into a refret now?
Totally depends on the instrument, the player, and the context. For people who have vintage Strats, if they got those original frets, they want to level them until they're almost countersunk. heavy metal guitar players usually use a real high jumbo fret. So sometimes as people wear divots in taller frets, they're concerned that leveling them are going to make the profile of fret too low. And but beyond that, I mean, I don't know. I guess if you have like you said, if you have a larger profile fret on an acoustic guitar, you should be able to level it numerous times.
Right.
And the point in which it's starting to cause anomalies. Well, the other thing that you pointed out was like intonation. There's lots of reasons why you would maybe want to do this, and I just pointed this out to somebody the other day. I said, and it was jumbo frets on a Strat,
right.
And he just had a lot of flat spots. It was like he didn't have real big divots, but he just had a lot of flat spots. And what Wade was saying about intonation is the fulcrum of a fret, or the peak of the fret. When you're crowning this fret, there's a point where the string makes contact with the fret, and if it's flat, it's going to make contact with it in the front edge of the fret, which is not really where the intonation point is. It's in the middle. So once you start to lose, if you have a big, wide, tall, profiled fret, and you start to lose the surface of that, you're going to want to recrown it, because it's going to throw particularly if you're very picky about intonation, and if you have a real tall fret, you probably are, because you can't press down too hard and bend it sharp. So I don't know, at the point in which it bothers you. But the other thing that we talked about was the difference between, getting a $400 or $600 Chinese guitar and a $500 or $600 or $700 American guitar. And when you factor in the significant cost of fret leveling and fret work, I think that's one of the big areas where you can really say you've got an advantage on an American guitar. I'm not saying you don't see or bad fretwork on American guitars, but
well, it's a regular topic that we have brought up on many episodes. What's some of the mods you can do to an inexpensive import guitar to make it a little bit better? And at the end of the day, if you are dropping $300-400 on some type of Chinese-made guitar, you almost have to do something to that guitar to play it more seriously.
Right.
Whether that is an electronics upgrade, whether it is, put some work into the frets. Setup work is not always that great. I mean, we've recommended everything from wiring and pickup options, but at the end of the day, right? If your frets,
you can put any pickups in there if it plays like garbage, And it's not the most exciting thing to say to somebody, hey, let's put $150 into making your frets good. You
have a brand new guitar.
You just bought a brand new guitar. Let's sink some money into something you don't know anything about. No, but I mean, it's a worthwhile investment, because I mean, that's the other thing, is I think sometimes why it does come up here is that people buy a $300 or $400 guitar with horrible fretwork, bring it in here, want us to set it up because they think, boy, we'll have a shop like this set up my $400 guitar, it's going to be amazing. We want to be miracle workers, but at the end of the day, when you have 3 or 4 rogue frets and you say, hey, we really need to address these frets to get the action any lower, otherwise we're whacking all these frets up and down the fretboard. It's not the most wonderful conversation to have with somebody. But,
well, we're obviously more than happy to work on any guitar that anybody brings in. But realistically, I'm a lot happier to have to do a setup on a $1,000 Strat than
Absolutely.
I am on a $150 no-name Chinese guitar, because know you're going to have a good neck and good frets.
Yep.
And even if you have to do any electronics work or anything, you're dealing with really quality hardware, woods, whatnot.
Right.
So don't be surprised if you buy $300-400 guitars, and especially under that don't be surprised if your frets are uneven. You're going to need a lot more than just
light, basic
light
setup.
tweaking.
Yeah.
Well, one other quick thing about the frets thing is something we see very frequently on acoustics as well as like 60s Ks, and that's the ramp or the ski jump at the end of the fingerboard.
Right, that would be another reason.
Which it's a different variation of a fret leveling, but what I'm talking about then is as guitars with glued-in necks age, the neck starts to pitch into the body a little bit under string tension, but the fingerboard that's out over the body doesn't change at all. So you kind of wind up with a little bit of a ramp, or what we call a ski jump right there. And sometimes you get crazy buzzing or double notes up there, and that's another place where some extreme fret leveling can sometimes take out the problem with that little ski jump up there. And it sort of leads a little bit into a follow-up to that I wanted to have for you, and that is when you're looking at all the wear and tear on a guitar, with an acoustic guitar, when is the right time to do a neck reset? So here's another topic we run into, and that is with guitars that have glued-in necks, there's a point at which almost all what's called a set neck guitar is going to be difficult to play, because over time, again, that neck pitching up from string tension over the years eventually makes your action very high. There's no more room to lower the bridge. Do you have an acoustic?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, at which time, this neck starts to come up a little bit, the neck angle will change, your strings go up, and to compensate for higher action, you lower the bridge saddle. So this white piece here, it's called the bridge saddle, and you sand material off of that until eventually you can't get it down into that slot anymore and have the strings make solid contact with it. Well, when that happens and your strings are still kind of high, is when you're going to sort of have to decide whether or not you need to have that neck reset, which is basically steaming the pocket. So there's usually a dovetail joint inside of here that's glued, and you drill a little hole and inject steam into there to loosen up the glue. You remove the neck, you change its neck angle, and try and get it back to as close as what it originally would have been when the guitar was brand new.
And a common misconception involving neck resets and neck adjustments is there's a truss rod in here. There's a metal rod that we can adjust the neck from basically nut to bout here. And that's basically more or less in there to correct as the string tension pulls forward, but also to compensate for whatever string gauge we want. But over time, the neck comes forward into the way it's set into the body.
Right.
And so the neck may be straight from here to here, but now instead of it being positioned here, it's positioned here. And so the saddle's all the way down. It's time to do a neck reset. Garrett, the other luthier that works here, has pointed out...
I think everybody knows Garrett.
Everybody knows Garrett. Too, that the other thing that's happening, as the saddle comes down and as the neck angle changes, is there's less downward pressure on the top, on the saddle. So as that's happening, at a certain point, you're really losing tone. You're not getting enough pressure on the saddle. So, you don't have to wait till your saddle is countersunk to do a neck reset. As you see it getting lower and lower and lower, that's, once it's getting pretty close there, you should probably go for it if it's a nice guitar.
Right. Well, this particular guitar,
sound better.
This is kind of unique because this guitar is an Alvarez, and they're sort of designed to give you a pretty good break angle over the saddle here by lowering the back of the bridge where the bridge pins are. So that saddle can get pretty darn low, and you've still got nice angle over the saddle. But what you're saying is when you start to lose contact with the saddle there, you're getting pull tension on the bridge, but no
push.
downward tension into the soundboard. And of course, that's where your tone is being created.
Yep.
So just sort of how this all ties in with frets, neck angle, the ramp there. Neck reset, not a cheap thing to do.
No.
So typically what's going to wind up affecting your decision on whether or not you want to have your neck removed and put back on at the proper angle is cost. Because it's anywhere from $300 to $500, and I guess sometimes even up from there, depending on
the value of the instrument or the difficulty of the procedure. So when you have a bad neck angle with a $300 guitar, unless there's a sentimental attachment there, Now, to put it into context, a well-made guitar that's well cared for, what would you say is the if you had to give a range of the length of time that one would factor in getting a neck reset on a guitar?
A well-made guitar with a dovetail joint, I would say anywhere typically from 30 to 40 years.
Yeah. Unfortunately, in the real world, people tend to not humidify their guitars, put them under the bed for extended periods of time, and then the strings will inherently pitch themselves up, putting enormous tension on it, pulling the neck forward. So, the more stable you keep the guitar, and the more you keep it at concert pitch, and the more you play it and visit it once in a while, the less likely you're going to need to have that neck reset kicked way up, But it's not an uncommon thing to take a 30 or 40-year-old guitar and have to do a neck reset on it. So that's definitely something to look at when you're looking on eBay at that 72 Gibson J, whatever the heck it is.
Right.
You know, you may want to go, why is this $500? Well, because it needs a $600 neck reset,
Yep.
you know, or whatever it is, you know. So the good news is, though, once you do it, it's like, that's why we call it a reset. It's like pushing the reset button. You're back to square one. You've got good neck angle, and hopefully if you take care of it, you get another 30 years. So it's
Like,
not
like
in the
an
context.
Etch-a-Sketch, right?
And then I disappeared.
Thank you. I don't know when everybody's going to see this, but in real time right now, it is April 6th, and we just found out this week that one of the legends of amplifiers has left us.
Hartley Peavy? Just kidding. Jim Marshall passed on yesterday. You know,
Age 88.
age 88, making amps since the early 60s. Officially 62, I think, is when Marshall amps started. What do we know about Marshall?
Well, I mean, I can tell you that, first of all, just about Jim Marshall, so even kind of not just talking about the company, but when you have somebody like Jim Marshall, and in my mind there are so many heroes in the guitar world manufacturing-wise.
Mm-hmm.
So not the rock stars, not the guitar heroes, but the guys like Jim Marshall, Leo Fender, Seymour Duncan,
Seth
you know,
Lover.
So, yeah, Robert Keeley, you know,
Bigsby. Yeah.
Paul Bigsby.
Paul Bigsby.
Yeah, I mean, there have been in the history of guitar so many that have long since left us. You know, everybody from the Dopira brothers and Adolf Rickenbacker and so on. But we have many living ones still.
Yep.
You know, and guys like Jim Marshall are those guys. So I mean, it really is, without going into great detail, it's a loss.
It really is.
To the soul of guitars, because there's not enough of these guys who are the geniuses behind these companies, and I love that they're there. So that being said, the company is just incredible.
Yep, we were talking about how the origins of Marshall was he had a shop in South London or something, a music store, and Pete Townsend and Richie Blackmore and guys like that would come into the shop and say, Jim, get me an amp that's super duper loud. But literally that was the impetus for Marshall's early amps, was literally guys like Pete Townsend trying to explain the sound.
Well, here's a Fender Princeton. How about this? Is that super loud?
Right.
No, bigger.
Yeah, bigger. I remember hearing a story about Leo Fender, and I just thought of this, Leo Fender, and who's the surf guitarist?
Dick Dale.
Dick Dale, yeah. And I think he literally tried to get, he did get Leo Fender to come to one of his outdoor beach concerts, because he was like, I want my guitar to sound like a drum, And I guess he designed the dual showman for Dick Dale.
Okay.
But he literally said, I'm playing for thousands of kids on these outdoor concerts, and I want this percussive sound.
Right.
So the sealed cabinet with this sort of more powerful head. I guess that was pretty much what Pete and Jim Marshall were talking about too. Just they're looking for just a big percussive, super loud sound, because they can't hear their guitars over the screaming girls and so on. And then just, I don't know about for you. I know you always talk about the JCM 800 as one of your grails.
Yeah, I mean, aside from, the GMPs and the Plexis, for me, the original JCM 800 was my favorite Marshall, because that was the first time you could get the rich, deep, percussive Marshall sound at every volume.
Right.
But still simplicity. I mean, it was almost, a 4-hole Plexi, but now with just 2 holes, 2 inputs, the holes are the inputs, and a pre-gain and a post-gain, just so that you could overdrive it at lower volumes, but nonetheless Marshall all the way. But I was never in a situation where, I could ever crank up a Marshall.
Right.
So for me, it always had to be lower volumes. So JCM 800 212 combo sounded amazing at practice volumes all the way up to, it could blow windows out, no problem.
Right. One of the first high-gain amplifiers was the 800, And then he was saying the Plexi, that was another design thing. I think I may be misquoted here. Look this up, definitely, because don't trust me on this. But
Chat room, look this one up right now.
But on the Plexi, what he's talking about was the early Marshall was called we called it the Plexi because it had a plexiglass panel, I guess, but with the
control
pots,
panel,
yeah,
right.
mounted on it. So we call them Plexis. But there were 4 inputs on it. And over the years, people learned that you could, quote, jump the channels. And this was like an early way to create a master volume circuit. So you plug your guitar into input 1 in the upper corner, visual aid,
Which had its own volume
which
control.
had its own volume, and then you'd run a cable from one corner to the other corner, and it would take the 2 volumes and combine them, and then you could add more bass or more treble or more gain or whatever. And the other thing you could do was actually you could jump from amp to amp. So you could take one Plexi and jump out of it into another Plexi and jump out of it into another Plexi, and so on.
And thus
so on.
the wall of Marshalls
Marshalls
began.
Yeah. And then the other thing that's important about it is the sealed cabinet, I think. They really marshaled the early, Marshall is known for, instead of having an infinite baffle, an open back design, which is an infinite baffle design, right?
You know speaker cabs better than I do.
Well, you have to look this one up too. But they were Fender always had combo amps, and they had sealed cabinets too. But Marshall was kind of the first company to just really go for this. Really, I think, tuned the cabinet and perfected it. That's the personal thing for me, is that somewhere down the line, I realized in just testing out a lot of different cabinets that the Marshall cabinets, even though if you open them up, they're kind of ghetto on the inside, but they're just there's something about them. They're tuned to a certain. They just work. You don't get any peaks or valleys, and they're just amazing tools. And when you're a musician, a guitar player, you get really passionate about these kinds of things. I think that's where. Again, people's personal experiences with this Marshall thing, they're gonna miss this guy, But the Plexis, the JCM 800s, the cabinets, so many important aspects, and then talk about the tones, Back in Black, all the Zeppelin, Hendrix, you're just listening to these. This real specific sound. So
well, there's a design element too. I can tell you that when you own your first Marshall product, the thickness of the walls of those cabinets, it makes you feel like you have bought the most substantial piece of musical equipment you'll ever own.
Right,
because the walls of Fender cabinets is like 1/2-inch pine or whatever.
Yeah.
I think the first time I owned a Marshall cabinet, I thought the walls of that cabinet must have been at least 2 inches thick.
Right.
I could barely lift it. I could barely reach my hand onto the walls of that thing.
Yep.
Deep. It's just beautiful. Industrial design of a musical product. So it's not just an accident that he said, let's screw some boards together and just see how this sounds. Somebody knew exactly what to present to musicians to say, I have got a substantial piece of equipment here.
Right. And tried and true, we were talking earlier about this and about how there were multiple prototypes that went into the early ones, I read a lot of interesting things too, that in the very early ones, they got the biggest transformers they could get their hands on, but they were really fell short from the amount of volume and voltage I think they were trying to use, and then they went with this super transformer later. But the first time you take a half stack with a Plexi or a JCM 800 and turn it about 3/4 of the way up and hit a power chord, and it just knocks the wind out of you practically.
Is it true what you told me once time though, that the first Marshall design was almost exactly the Fender Tweed Bassman?
Yeah,
circuitry?
We were talking about Townsend, or I've heard things where they said we want the volume of some of the newer Fender amps or newer amps in general, but if you listen to old Fender Tweed amps like the 59 Bassman, when you listen to recordings of them, they didn't turn them up real loud to make them distort, but which was really surprising to me. Whenever we've only had a handful of 50s Tweed amps, Fender made amps in the 50s that were Tweed, and then later what we call the blackface amps came out in the 60s, and they're pretty different. I was real surprised when I first tried the various Tweed amps that you turn them up a little. Oh yeah, it sounds like a Fender, and you turn it up halfway, and you're like, whoa, what's going on here? And then you dime the thing, and it's like, it's just like, oh my God, it's all this distortion, and so I think that was one of the design criteria was can we make an amp that has the volume of a modern amp, this being 1960 or 62. But with the breakup of a 50s Tweed, or some of the Gibsons break up in a real nice way. I find it so fascinating that, early 50s rock, you hear a little bit of overdrive and distortion, but there was some engineer there going, whack! Now you turn it down, But those amps produce this wonderful overdrive that you later, I think the tube guys were like, how can we make these tube amps clean? And in the end, the rock guys were like, hey, I want the dirty one from the old thing, but louder, So I think Marshall nailed that, I think. Yeah. But yes, the rumor I heard was that he took a 59 Bassman, which was probably the loudest of the Tweeds, or up there a ways anyway.
Pretty close. Well, the twin, I think, would have been the loudest. But
yeah, so he took one of the big dogs of the Tweeds, and the original Plexi is almost identical to the original Tweed Bassman, only the transformers are wound in a reverse direction and oriented different or something like that, and the sealed cabinet, as opposed to the 410 that would have opened back 410. But literally, I guess if you talk to an electronics geek, they don't sound anything alike to me.
No.
But apparently they are quite similar in their design.
Well, is it the tubes that they were using too? Because I know the Brits tended to favor EL34s and EL84s. The Americans tended to favor 6550s, 6L6s, 6V6s.
Yeah.
So is it a tube related thing, or I think we get a lot of people with the misconception that Marshall amps are Class A, but they're not Class A.
No, they're not. They're hot biased. They would refer to our Class A section. But no, what I did actually read a little bit about the early Marshalls, and so there's a couple different tubes that they used early on, and there's a couple different transformer changes. And if you think about changing transformers in an amp design, or changing the tubes that you're using, be they 34s or 6L6s or 6V6s, they make the amp sound different. So you can say, well, a Bassman had 6L6s, I guess, right?
Yep.
So the early Marshalls had
6550s?
No, I know they did. Well, there's a couple different tubes. I think they used 5881s, and they used the KT66s at some point, and then they went to EL34s at some point. So there's a number of different recipes there, but the basis of it was that Bassman, but with different tubes and different transformers, you get all sorts of different colors, So I think the early Marshalls went. I think the ones that are the most coveted are not the super early ones, but the ones after they get the bigger transformers. But everybody's taste is different.
Right.
But really freaking cool.
Yeah, there's always a collectability factor to it.
Yeah.
And so when you say most sought after, certainly early Marshall amps are sought after by collectors.
Rarity and kitchen Marshall and all that.
Right.
But sound wise, I think after the JTM 45, where they start to get into the little bit more muscular ones, those are the ones that I think probably sonically are the rulers.
So I honestly don't know, but Jim Marshall wasn't with Marshall at the end, was he? I mean, did he sell Marshall? Like, isn't JMI?
Well, Korg bought him, but I think he was still affiliated.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah, or Korg at least distributed them domestically. I don't know. Maybe Korg bought him at the end, and we'll have to look this up.
So what is my complete?
Well, I mean, at 88, I don't know
right.
how much he was really running the show, even if he was.
Hopefully, calmly and contently retired, maybe at the end.
Yeah.
But Jim Marshall.
Yep. Goodbye, and peace to you, brother.
And thank you so much.
Yeah.
We are a little short on time, so I'm just going to give a teaser as to what we will talk about next episode. You can hold that.
Oh my goodness.
While I jump on to viewer mail.
You're hearing that one.
All right, viewer mail. Hello, Wade, Alex, and Dan. I discovered your podcasts about 6 months ago and have enjoyed them very much. They are by far the best shop talk programming, and I read this a while back blindly, and I just printed it out now because I'm like, oh, I remember this being a pretty good thing, but I didn't screen it here. So if there's any craziness or expletives, I apologize.
Language.
They are by far the best shop talk programming I've been able to find on the net. I've been playing guitar for the better part of 16 years. In that time, I have come to acquire about a dozen or so electric guitars in my collection of gear. This past spring, I finally went out and bought the essential tools from StuMac. So once again, a little plug here to StuMac.com. Really great source online or by catalog for tools, parts, finishing materials, and whatnot. Essential tools from StuMac to perform my own setups on these electric guitars in order to save myself the increasing costs of keeping a dozen guitars set up and intonated at any given time. So far, my results have been very positive. The one issue I keep running into is this. On some of my Stratocasters, I find it nearly impossible to intonate my low E string, and believe me, this is a very common, you know, self-intonation and understanding all the things that go into that, big issue. Yep. Impossible to intonate my low E string with the given distance of travel available to the string's saddle. The 12th fret octave note is always sharp. No matter how far from the neck I move the saddle away, it's always a little bit sharp on the tuner. Is this an issue that other guitar techs face? Is getting it, quote, as close as possible instead of dead accurate acceptable in the professional realm? For the sake of the argument, I doubt that if I didn't know the issue existed, my ears wouldn't think they hear any difference. And that's going to bring up another whole Alex thing. Should I be content with as close as possible? For the record, I am using a Peterson strobo flip. So first of all,
ooh, wow, okay.
For the home setup,
that blows my theory. Yeah.
So I'm using a Peterson strobo flip for my intonation needs. Thanks. Thank you for your time. I hope you make it out. I hope to
make it.
I hope to make it out to your shop someday in my travels.
He's from Canada.
Anthony Mancino. I hope to make it out to your shop
someday. Yeah.
I'm not your friend, buddy. Sorry, South Park Canada episode. This is from Anthony Mancino in Providence, Rhode Island. Alex, go ahead and dive in because...
Okay, first theory...
The setup is, believe me, but before he answers this, the setup is an art. So
yeah.
Let's get the brushes out.
Well, I mean, the first thing that popped in my head was the low E, the lowest string, challenges the cheaper tuners. You know, so I thought, well, you just need to upgrade your tuner a little. But the strobo flip that you have is got miles of extension in both directions, so that ain't your problem. I have no idea what your problem. No, I'm just kidding. But no, I guess from a physics standpoint, the lower the note, the bigger the wave, right? So if you're going to intonate, you know, your low E string, it's a much bigger wave. So first of all, be patient and make sure that you're averaging that peak, because what you'll notice is when you first hit that E, it's going to go boing, way sharp, and then it's going to, so you need to see a picture of the whole wave, and that strobe tuner will do that. So let the whole wave pass, it'll go sharp, and then it'll come down, and when you average it, if it's hovering above E, then you got to move that saddle a little bit. But if it peaks out and then comes back to roughly E, you know, again, you're a little more closer to rock and roll. As to what other things could cause it, there is a number of things that could cause that. Assuming that your neck is straight, if your action was high enough,
This is the thing with teaching art. You know, it's okay, how do I make a beautiful painting?
Right. Okay,
I
mean, there's a lot of things that could cause it. I mean, again, I would look at just the wave and make sure that you're seeing the big picture there. You know, if you have your pickups too close, sometimes that low E, because it has so much mass, you might get a false reading or an inaccurate reading because the mass of the string is even if it's not getting pulled down, it might just throw a warble in it, or it's causing the string not to resonate at whatever frequency E is,
79.6 or something like that.
Right. So it might throw that off a little bit.
Let me even generally say too that I mean, with a Stratocaster, even from the cheap import Strats all the way up to custom shop, there should be plenty of room in a low E saddle to accommodate intonation for even a 56 or maybe even up to a 59 or a 60.
Right.
We've done setups like custom setups on Strats where we've put like a 60 or a 62 on the 6th string, and you take the spring out completely and let that saddle
Move
go
it
all the way back,
yeah.
and you can dial it in pretty good. So if you are bringing your saddle way back and you're using like 10 to 46 or 11 to 48s, there is another issue going on. So in which case, then back to like magnet pull and stuff like that.
Check that magnet pull. Just as an experiment, maybe lower the magnets on the bass side just to see if you get a better reading that way. That at least eliminates that. If I'm going to assume that you got your neck straight, but if your neck has enough bow in it, you're going to get a weird reading. You're going to pull sharp. If the nut's real high down here, everything above here is going to get wacky on you. So you got to make sure your nut slots, are not crazy high.
Well, and then to quickly just cover, the technicality of some of that, the nut slots need to be cut at an angle backwards towards the tuning keys because your string needs to bridge at the leading edge.
And as we pointed out, frets. If your frets are all flat on top, you're going to get crazy. Especially, if you got a weird fret right here, you're going to get a crazy reading. So, at the end of the day, you get it as close as you can, and you rock. But certainly you can take it farther and farther and farther if you.
Well, my question, if I could ask Anthony, would be, did he get his A on? I mean, let's say all other 5 intonated perfectly, and your E, you just keep going back and back and back, and it's off. In which case, then, what do we always say?
When everything makes sense, it's a bad string.
Yeah.
So maybe you got a funky string.
Don't be afraid to yank a string off. We've had many, many brand new strings right out of the pack just not intonate. They've got some defect, some kink in the core wire, or something where they've got a warble in the string.
Or some sort of tire hits the road thing where we've run into this where a certain guitar and a certain set of strings, just that low E with that bronze 80-20 54 just does not work on that guitar. We use 3 of them, same thing. Use it, go to a different brand, that's fine. So.
And without absolutely 100%, consistency, we do see more intonation issues with flat wounds, with pure nickel strings, with
all steel strings,
stainless steel strings, coated strings. I mean, we are. Alex and I both.
The more you're monkeying around with the alloys, the more possible issues can arise, or coatings, or treatments.
We're dyed in the wool. We've talked about this D'Addario guys. D'Addario has never given me, a bad reading on any of my guitars. 30 years of playing D'Addario 10s, I would never switch. It is, it's my go-to benchmark.
The reason you
alpha
see,
string.
the reason you see so many manufacturers using D'Addarios and so many shops, they're like, why don't you go with the D'Addario? Because that's really the reality of it. Over time, the only way you can know this is by attrition, by making 10,000 guitars a year with strings and going, you know what, let's make them with good strings, or doing setups every day of the week and being like, geez, once again, I have this strange anomaly that I tried to, which is the genius of your point, when nothing else makes sense. But, you spend all this time chasing demons and it ends up being the string. So definitely try the string thing, because you'd be surprised how often that happens.
Well, we did have a customer not too long ago buy from us an HD28. HD28s come from the factory with Martin SP. I think
lifespans, I think now.
Yeah, right. 13 to 56 mediums. Played perfectly, intonated perfectly, but he used some type of coated string that we don't carry here, but he had his own string that he wanted to put on. Called me, pretty upset that his intonation was just a mile off. He was concerned that the bridge was glued on in the wrong place, something like that. And I was like, no, we just don't see that with a Martin HD28. Had him bring it in, and I said, just for the sake of the argument, I'm going to restring it with factory strings. Let's see what we get. And it intonated perfect. I mean, it is crazy how perfect an HD28 is on every single fret up and down the neck.
Exactly.
So with a fresh set of Martin SP strings, it intonated perfectly. And I said, well, just so you know, when you go back to your strings again, you may get anomalies.
It may happen, yeah.
And he said, I'm not going back to my strings.
Two other things that I've run into, or at least one I can remember now, is one time that story reminded me of a guitar that we had here, an OM21, a Martin, that we had for a while. every once in a while I'd pick it up and play it. I mean, and like you said, it was just, it was one of those guitars you pick up and it was just dead on.
Yeah.
The intonation just top to bottom was just beautiful. You played up and down, and I knew that. And I sold it to a guy who was an accomplished fingerstyle player, or studying it at the UW, so a real serious player. And he played it many times, and then eventually bought it, so he knew the instrument even. And the day after he bought it, he called me up and he said, "Oh, I have a recital, and it's the craziest thing. My low E string is just way out, And I was like, well, that's crazy. I just couldn't get my mind around it, because I was like, I know this guitar. I said, well, bring it in. Let's figure it out. So he brings it in. And I go, and I hit the harmonic, and then I hit the note. And I'm like, whoa, what the hell is going on here? This is way off, And I think I don't even remember if I don't know why I was able to figure this out so instantly, but I don't remember if I put another string on there or not, but I said, show me how you stretch your strings out. And he goes like this. And he just pulls on one string, and he goes to the next one, he just pulls on one string. So they're paranoid that they're going to go out of tune. Guitar players, obviously, this is a concern when we go on stage, So you're supposed to stretch your strings out. So he just pulled on them, and I think what he was doing was putting just a big peak in the string. And again, it throws off the vibration or shortens the distance or whatever it was, But I put a brand new string on there, and it was just dead on, And I said, just stretch them out like this, nice and gentle, multiple times.
Yeah.
Don't put a giant peak in there and just send
slow
the
and
heck out of
steady.
it.
Slow and steady wins the race. Yeah.
So there is an enormous number of things, but that's again why you want to rule that's another reason why you want to rule the string out. As a possible problem is just a strange bend in it, a divot. All sorts of things can happen to them, even if they're not defective.
Right.
You can damage them putting them on. Damage them stretching them. So.
It's the 1,000,001 pieces to the puzzle of a guitar logic. So be patient. We'll keep presenting it to you. We could do this in the form of an iPad app for $3.99, but I think we'll just keep doing it.
You can download it at Moreau and Dr. Moreau. And
we'll keep doing it as a free podcast. And on that note, we are out of here. This has been Season 3, Episode 1. We covered a lot of stuff in a lot of time. We do have a few more things. We'll throw them into the next episode, so stick around for that. I mean, not right this moment. We are obviously going to talk about Rickenbackers in the near future, which is just one of the most charming and mysterious and incredible guitar companies ever. So actually, your homework is to
tell me what this guitar is, because this is a bad dog.
Think about it and learn about it.
Only took us 3 years to get.
Exactly. Part of the beauty and the charm.
To take
so thanks for joining us. Check us out. The website is wadesguitarshop.com. Click on the podcast link. Check out previous episodes. Check us out on Moreau, Zune Marketplace, and of course the iTunes Store. That's nice. Are those things scratched out there? Like us on Facebook. I'd like to once again thank you, Ed. Thank you, Jocelyn, for... Oh,
my eye! Ed, are you okay? Call an ambulance.
Jocelyn. Oh! That was close. Try one more time. Jocelyn.
She's got safety.
This has been the Guitar Shop Podcast from Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Thank you, everybody. We will be back again soon. Promise. Hang in there.